Just want to make sure we're recording before we get started. And Marlia, does it look like it's recording on your end?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So we should be good to go. Thank you everyone for joining for our virtual training today.
Hold on 1 second.
Maybe not.
There we go.
There we go. I was just talking to myself, everybody. Well, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us today for our FFVP Startup Virtual Training. A few housekeeping items before we get started. This meeting is being recorded, so all cameras and microphones are turned off. If you have a question throughout the training, feel free to drop your question in the chat or just raise your hand using the feature at the top of your screen. Another thing before we get started is just a reminder that the state of Tennessee does not permit the use of AI tools like Otter on these meetings. So be sure that if you do have one of those tools, it's turned off, because if we do find those tools in our chat, we will have to remove them and block them from the meeting. So we do appreciate you all respecting our decision to safeguard this information. And I will now hand it off to our presenter today, Miss Marlia Finch.
Awesome. Thank you, Lexi. I will ask if you will keep an eye on the lobby. For some reason, the settings are a little bit different today, but that's okay because we love
You got it.
technology.
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Like Lexi said, I am Marlia Finch. I am the Assistant Director here with the Department of Education School Nutrition Program. And you are here because you have been awarded fresh fruit and vegetable grant dollars for this upcoming school year. And this is a required startup training that I have to provide to all grantees, even if you have been a grantee for years now. This is just our annual training. A lot of this should be a refresher for those that have had rewards in the past. And yes, Leah, that is okay. We'll take care of the AI, so don't worry about that. So yes, without further ado, we will get the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program Startup Training started. To start off with, our mission statement here at the department is to develop extraordinary school nutrition professionals, such as yourselves, and provide strategies to increase consumption of healthy school meals, which is a great segue into the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program. So our objectives today is to understand the importance of Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program, so FFVP. Obviously, you guys know the importance of it. You've applied for it and you've been awarded. So that's a great first step. And now we are going to learn about how to implement the program at your local level sites, and then understand how to submit your monthly claims for reimbursement for FFVP. All right, we will start with just the basics of program operations and what the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program is. Okay, so yes, this is still the current Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program handbook that USDA has provided, and I will also drop a link in the chat as well. It hasn't been updated since 2012, I believe, but we are told that there should be an updated handbook on the horizon. So I will definitely share that out as soon as possible, as soon as we get it. So this handbook basically goes over the overall goals of the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program. So those goals are to expand the variety of produce options and fresh fruit and vegetable options for students, and to help increase the consumption of healthier meal or snack options with, basically a little taste test each time that you offer fresh fruit and vegetables. And then we also want to develop long-term healthy habits. So lucky for us, FFVP is for the elementary age kiddos. So we're hoping more interaction with FFVP programs or similar programs. It will help instill healthy habits long-term for students. Right. So I'm going to go back because, again, we love technology around here. It skipped a slide. So first off, like I said earlier, congratulations. You've been awarded FFVP grant funds. Now what? So you're here. Check. You are participating in the startup training. And then two, you're going to operate your program as you submitted in your applications that got approved. And then three, you will submit your claims on a monthly basis. That way you can get reimbursements. And then four, we are going to encourage you to share stories, pictures, and seek best practices from others, your colleagues across the state who are also operating this program. And then we're going to encourage you to use us, the state agency, as a resource to help program improvement, whether that be a brainstorming session or asking about different resources that we may have found or may have created. Use us as a resource. We are happy to help improve your programs and make sure they are successful. All right. So again, that there's the highlight of the USDA handbook. And now let's talk about how will the fresh fruit and vegetable program operate? We do have several new directors and different SFAs that have not operated the fresh fruit and vegetable program ever. So I'm happy and excited that you guys are here and you are willing to give this program a try. I think it's going to be very impactful and beneficial for your students. So you might be asking, okay, how am I going to operate? Well, all of those questions that you completed during the fresh fruit and vegetable application packet, it paints the picture on how you plan to operate. So follow those steps in your packet that you submitted back in February, March, April. So if you plan to operate and offer fresh fruit and vegetables twice a week, all right, great. There's your first step. You are going to offer those fresh fruit and vegetables twice a week. Um, Again, if you get more comfortable as you are getting established in your program operations for this grant program, and you decide you want to try operating FFVP 4 days a week, incredible. All you have to do is send an email over to me, and I will update your application in TMAC with a little note, just so in case you have an administrative review and your application doesn't technically match how you are operating, that note will indicate that actually, yes, this is how you are operating now. That way your reviewer can say, yes, they are following their FFVP application operations. So all you have to do is send a quick email and we will get that updated. So that is documented for everyone involved. Other operation examples, school nutrition personnel will distribute produce items to classrooms after meal times, and then the teachers will distribute the items to students. So many times we go into schools and we see after that last lunch period, you might start seeing students from classrooms trickle in to pick up their baskets, trays, bags, however you distribute FFVP items to those students, take them back to the classroom, and then the teachers will distribute items to students at their designated FFVP time. Um, Again, students pick up FFVP items and take them back to the classroom and have it at their designated time. Or some classes may come to the cafeteria as a whole and pick up their items for FFVP and have their FFVP time in the cafeteria. So again, lots of different operational examples. Most people we see cafeteria staff will distribute the produce items to each classroom, whether that be in bins, bags, coolers, what have you. There's lots of ways to operate FFVP. And for some of our veteran operators on the call today, if you wouldn't mind to share some of examples of how you distribute FFVP items in the chat, I think some of our newer folks could learn from that. So I'll give you a minute to drop your operations into the chat and we can see if there are any new ones that aren't listed on this slide. And if you're shy, nervous, that's quite all right. I'll still give you a little bit of time to get things typed into the chat, and then we'll move on. Great. So now that we have a basic understanding on how FFVP will operate, again, you control the operations based on your application. Now we ask, what can be served with fresh fruit and vegetable program? Well, hence the name, fresh fruits and vegetables um, can be served with the fresh fruit vegetable program. That does not, you cannot include canned, frozen, or dried produce items for FFVP. We are looking for fresh items. And then low fats or fat-free dips are allowed with vegetables only. And as a reminder, that low fat dip is considered 3 grams of fat or less per 1 ounce servings. And I know some of these manufacturers have changed their recipes a little bit, so make sure you are reading your labels before providing that low fat option. Yes, there is low fat ranch available. I know it's hard to come by from time to time, but yes, low fat is allowable for vegetables only in this program. You cannot provide smoothies or other combination items. Again, the intent of the fresh fruit and vegetable program is to provide those fresh produce items as they are normally. And then cooked vegetables are allowed once a week, but you must have a nutrition education component included in that snack service for the FFVP. So cooked vegetables are allowed once a week, but you must have that nutrition education component while you're serving those cooked vegetables. That's the main requirement for FFVP when it comes to serving items, but cooked vegetables must have that nutrition education piece. Best practice is to have nutrition education piece for all snack services. However, cooked vegetables, that is a requirement. There's a handful of folks that do the cooked vegetables, but we don't see that very often just because cooked vegetables, you want to serve it warm, and there's a lot of logistics that go into the cooked vegetables being served. All right, thank you those that shared. I'm going to go back to the chat to talk about some operational items that people have shared. So it looks like Kathy likes to do farmer market stands in the hallways. That's fantastic. Kiddos can come pick it up, and it's showcased in a different way. Let's see. And Hardin County, some schools pick up their FFVP snacks from the cafeteria, and others take them to the classroom. Okay, so each site gets to decide on how those options are being distributed. And that really helps to empower that site too. So they have a say on how this program will work. So that's exciting. Good job, Cheryl. Let's see, Regina, they have tables set up in each elementary hallway. And due to the timing issues, they can now deliver to each classroom so they can eat it at their convenience. So awesome. Those are 3 great examples of how to successfully operate FFVP. All right. So when can these fresh fruits and vegetables be served? Well, during the school day, but not before or after school. So again, during the actual school day. And then you cannot serve FFVP during meal times. So you're not serving it during breakfast or lunch. They may pick up during lunchtime if they've already eaten lunch and they are taking it back to their classroom, but you are not to serve the actual fresh fruit and vegetable during breakfast or lunch meal times. And then you cannot serve FFVP during summer school or summer camps. The intent of this program is to really serve during the traditional school year. So if it's summer school or a summer camp, that's not considered the traditional school year. So you cannot operate FFVP. All right, so we've looked at operations and when can you operate? How about who can receive these fresh produce items? Well, all of those children who are considered enrolled in the FFVP school. I know there are some combination schools that have been awarded this year. So all those students that are pre-K through 6 that are considered enrolled in this FFVP awarded site are eligible for the produce items. We've had a couple questions about teachers and whether or not they can participate in FFVP. They absolutely can, as long as they are participating as a role model. So that means they are offering these fresh produce items to their students and they're talking about that item while they're trying it. So you have cherry tomatoes. Great. What does it look like? What color is it? What are tomatoes good for? Just really being interactive with the kiddos while they are taking that time to eat the FFVP item. Um, this program is not intended for parents, community, or other school personnel. So if you have a secretary that just so happens to be in the room while the teacher is passing out FFVP items and she decides she wants a snack, she cannot participate in FFVP unless she starts talking about some nutrition education. Um, and then they would be helping to teach and be the active role model. So again, teachers in the classroom, teaching and being an active participative role model can have fresh fruit and vegetable items. Other school personnel that are not actively participating as role models cannot. Okay, so I think we have the basics of operations, what we're serving, how we're serving it. Now, the fun part. How are you reimbursed? How is FFVP funded? And what about equipment? So, looking at FFVP funding, it is a federal reimbursement program, just like any other school nutrition program. FFVP is unique in the fact that we have two allocations. So at the state level, I'm working out of two pots of money, but you guys don't have to worry about that because I handle it for you. So that is why in TMAC, you will see two different allocation periods. So the first period is July 1st through September 30th. And then the second allocation period is October 1 through June 30th. Again, it is in TMAC and your allocations are broken down. So when you got your award letter, you saw one total amount that you were awarded for either just your one school or each different site had a list of the total allocation amount. So we take that total allocation amount and then break it into two different allocations for you. So that first allocation period, July through September, is about 18% of your total allocation. And then your second allocation is about that 82% that is left over from your total allocation. So just want to explain that and why it is split up a little bit. And all funds must be used or obligated by the close date of those allocation periods. So your first allocation in TMAC needs to be spent by the end of September. And anything that you may have left over from that first allocation will not roll over to the second allocation period. So you need to use that first allocation by the end of September. Oh, you might ask, well, I have these two allocations. Now, how do I need to budget for FFVP? Well, we do have a toolkit on our website that you are more than welcome to use. I will drop the link in there as well. It is under that resource box, and it says Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program Toolkit. And if we have time towards the end of this training, I can walk through that toolkit with you and share my screen. It basically has a good spreadsheet that you can plug in your budget, and it will break down monthly allocations if you want to do monthly that way. Um, there's a lot of cool, just basic budgeting tools within this toolkit for you that we can walk through later. All right, this next one confuses people a little bit. So as an awarded site, we encourage you to spend at least 90% of your funds to the maximum extent possible to be considered for the program the following school year. We understand things happen and you may not be able to spend all of your money. That's why we give a little bit of a buffer for 90% spending. However, we really encourage you to spend as much money of your allocation as possible. That shows that you are a good steward of federal funds, and that if we award you dollars, then you will spend the dollars. And that's just a good practice, and that shows that you are a great operator of the program to be considered for the following year. And then, so we really encourage you to spend your money, but we don't encourage you to overspend your money. So if a site overspends your allocation, we will only be able to reimburse the amount of your total allocation. So if we gave you $100 and you spent $150 and you submit your claim for $150, since that is how much you spent, we'll only be able to reimburse that $100. So just giving you an example there. However, there is a slight caveat. If you need to adjust your allocation dollars and funds between sites, say you had a site closed for 2 weeks because of the flu and you weren't able to operate FFVP, but you had another site that did not have to close and you actually already spent all of your FFVP dollars for that month, we can shuffle allocations between sites for an SFA. All you need to do is email me saying, hey, Marlia, site A, we were closed, we couldn't use these funds. Could you transfer $500 to site B? And I will say, great, yes, thank you for the heads up. And then I will make that adjustment in TMAC. Again, it's a simple email. It's a pretty quick turnaround time. And if you have any questions about readjusting funds or reallocating your funds, please let me know. It's very important to stick to your allocations this first allocation because I don't have extra funds to give. That's a little bit different towards the end of the school year. But again, let's focus on spending what you were allocated first. And then if any situations arise, just give me a call or send me an email, and I'm happy to work through your specific situation with you. Alrighty, so we talked about budgeting, and let's get into the meat about how you spend these dollars. So you have operating costs, and that can look like your food items, your non-food items, so napkins, serving bowls, Ziploc baggies, however you're serving items, trash bags for the program, any delivery charges with the produce you're ordering, direct labor, so your staffing that's preparing the item, serving or cleaning up for FFVP items would be considered operational cost. And then we can also consider indirect labor. So those planning for FFVP items, submitting claims, maintaining records, all the fun things can be considered operating cost. Then you have your administrative costs. So with FFVP, you cannot spend more than 10% of the total allocation on administrative costs. So these costs may include your durable equipment, such as a refrigerator, a produce slicer, carts, coolers, that sort of thing. which again, any durable equipment purchased with FFVP dollars must receive department approval prior to purchasing. And that's just a double check to make sure you are not exceeding that 10% of your administrative costs for equipment. And that is a very easy process that we will get to in a minute. Also, you could include indirect labor as an administrative cost. So you have the option with your indirect labor to either put it under operating costs or administrative costs. I will caution you that if you choose to put your indirect labor costs under administrative cost throughout the year, you still need to be mindful of that 10% threshold of your admin cost. Sometimes towards the end of the year, I have to pick up the phone and say, hey, could you move your indirect labor costs into operating costs because you've already hit your 10% threshold for those admin costs. So to help avoid a phone call or having to readjust your claims after you've submitted that, it might be a best practice to go ahead and just put your indirect labor into your operating costs. We do have that flexibility there. All right, moving right along. So talking about equipment, where to start? Well, first off, let's see, do you have what you need to operate FFVP? So really assess your equipment needs. Do you need a small refrigerator to keep these fresh produce items in, separate from your lunch and breakfast items? If so, great. This would be a great time to do your research and see what you could get with these grant funds that you're able to spend on equipment. So with equipment and FFVP, you must obtain approval in writing via email for those durable items. So again, it's a simple email to me, and I get those turned around pretty quickly because I know how the procurement process works. So again, I just need written approval or a written justification of your needs, and then I will supply a written approval for those equipment items. And those larger items, as a reminder, is filed under that administrative cost. So that's why we encourage, if you need any pieces of equipment, to go ahead and knock those out in the beginning of the year, so that first allocation, so you can gauge whether or not you've already hit that 10% admin cost threshold for the remainder of the year. So if you know that piece of equipment might hit that 10% threshold, great, cool. Go ahead and get it at the beginning of the year to set you up for success later on. And that last bullet just says what I just said. We encourage you to go ahead and get that piece of equipment at the beginning versus waiting to the end of the year in case you've already spent admin costs and you don't have the wiggle room anymore to cover those costs. All right. So if you are looking for FFVP equipment, you will submit the following via email to me: the site name that you plan to use this equipment for. Why do you need this equipment? How is your current equipment not adequate? And it can be as easy as, we don't have a refrigerator, or we need coolers, that sort of thing, if you don't already have the equipment. And please give me some details about how you plan to use this equipment, cooler, whatever it is, just for FFVP. So you'll have some procedures in place, best practices in place to indicate that that is used just for FFVP. But if you plan to share your piece of equipment, how are you sharing it and how are you prorating the total cost? Because if you are sharing a refrigerator with an after-school program, that's not 100% FFVP. So we cannot cover 100% of the cost. Okay, great. And then also we'd like to know how many times a week will you serve FFVP? So that just kind of justifies the need for the equipment a little bit, and these are the items that the USDA will look for if we are audited for FFVP. So we ask you for the information up front so we don't have to ask for it on the back end. And as with everything else, FFVP procurement, yes, competitive purchasing is required, along with all other federal programs. Micro purchases can be used to obtain local produce as long as the appropriate procurement procedures are taken. And again, it's the fresh fruit and vegetable program, so make sure you're serving both fruits and vegetables. And then FFVP purchases must be easily identifiable to support your monthly claims and documentation for administrative reviews. So what that can look like is we've seen people highlighting the FFVP items on their bigger invoices and receipts. So that's a way to separate those out. We've seen keeping all FFVP orders separate from other orders that you may have. And then we've also seen FFVP items labeled in the kitchen. So in your storage area, you might have an FFVP shelf, or again, if you have an FFVP refrigerator, that's labeled in your kitchen. All great practices that we've seen. All right. So we've already touched on this a little bit. What records do you need to maintain to back that monthly claim? Well, like I said, your invoices of your operating expenses, such as the produce, supplies, or any records of direct labor costs that you have with FFVP. Invoices and records for administrative expenses. So if you bought that piece of equipment, you need to keep all of your procurement paperwork maintained to back up that claim. And again, that written justification of why you need it will also be maintained. And then the approval that you got prior to purchasing that item. All sorts of records that you need to maintain to back your monthly claim. Even though we have previously approved it, we need to make sure that you're keeping documentation on your end as well. That way, if you do have an administrative review, and if someone were to look at your claim, you can say, yes, all your documentation was there to back that claim. Other records that you might want to maintain as a best practice is information on publicity. So how are you advertising FFVP in your school? So any pictures of your advertisement or any transcripts of morning announcements that may have highlighted the produce items that day. These are all best practices just to kind of keep on file with your FFVP items. Information to show that your submitted plan was followed. So remember that plan that you submitted on your application? All right. So you had a plan, you submitted it on your application, you told us how you were going to operate. So what kind of items would back that up? Well, it could be production records for FFVP days served. It could be the nutrition education materials you've provided, tally sheets of how many kiddos tried FFVP items that you served, all sorts of things as a best practice. Because the more documentation you have, the better. And it helps you operate and improve for next year. So if you want to reuse nutrition education materials, you would have that on file right there. So again, all of those best practices to help maintain documentation on how FFVP has operated and to kind of back that monthly claim to show everything that you've done. All right. So you're operating great. Now let's get you reimbursed. So we are going to walk through the claiming process for FFVP and TMAC. All right. So as with all other programs that we operate, when do you submit the monthly claim? We highly encourage you to submit it within the 30 days of that claim month. So if you have a claim for August, we highly encourage you to get it in by the end of September, so that 30-day mark. I know most of you get it in the first week of the following month, and that's fantastic. But as a reminder, you do have 60 full days, and beyond the 60 days, your claim is considered late. So if you get that August claim in on November 1st, that would be considered late because you're well past the 60-day mark at that point. And then, fun fact, remember that one late claim grace that we allow every 36 months across all periods? FFVP is included on those programs. So again, you are only allocated one late claim grace per 36 months across all programs. And I highly encourage you not to use a fresh fruit and vegetable late claim as your one grace late claim. Because typically with fresh fruit and vegetable, your claims are much smaller than your lunch or breakfast claims. So I don't want you to forego your late claim option for 36 months over all programs over $1,200 worth of fruits and vegetables, when you might need that for a $20,000 lunch claim. I'll let that sink in because it has happened. Again, you're only allocated one late claim per 36 months across all of our meal programs. So that's lunch, breakfast, after school snacks, SSO, the whole gamut. All right. So what are you going to include on those monthly claims? Well, you're going to include all those fresh fruit and vegetables that you purchased during the month, include any supplies also purchased, and then your operating labor, administrative labor, if you're going that route. And then once you submit all of that information, please be sure to hit submit for payment. If you do not hit submit for payment, I will call you and say, hey, can you go in and click that button for me, please? Because without you hitting submit for payment, it will not show up in my queue to review and approve your claim. So we want to get you paid in a timely manner. So hit submit for payment when you're ready. Okay, so we've talked through the claim process. Now I want to show you what that claim process will look like in TMAC. I do have screenshots. And again, this recording and the slide deck will be sent out afterwards. And if you still have questions after all of that, please give me a call. I'm happy to help walk you through the claims, especially for our newer folks that are on the line. All right, so your claim process, you will go into TMAC and you will hit the claims button up at the top. So kind of right next to the application in that top toolbar, you'll hit claims, and then this screen will pop up for you. And then you will simply click which month you want to submit your claim for. It should be very similar to lunch and breakfast. All right, so creating a new claim with FFVP, once you hit that claim month, you will then see this screen. There are 3 claim categories. So we have the fresh fruit and vegetable codes, operational costs, and then administrative costs. I said codes, I meant costs. Okay, so you have your produce costs, your operational costs, and your administrative costs. So you'll click into that fresh fruit and vegetable costs because we're spending it. And then you are going to enter items into that section. Produce item costs can be entered 2 different ways. You can go the detailed way, and you can list out each produce item that you served. So they have celery sticks, apples, grapes. You can do it very individualized and detailed like this. Or you can lump all of your produce purchases together. That is quite all right with me. Both cases, you will have your documentation to support your claim at the local level. So either way works for us as long as you can support your claim. Okay. And then remember those 3 categories on costs that you can claim for? You'll just work your way through. So if you have operational costs, you'll click into your operational cost and you might add your labor, and then you might add the napkins or low-fat ranch dip that you've bought for that month. Again, it's pretty self-explanatory once you click into the claim, but again, if you have any questions, please reach out. All right, and once you've walked your way through the 3 different categories, if you have all 3 different categories to claim, you will hit that submit for payment button. So hit submit for payment, and then it'll show up in my queue so I can review and approve your claims. All right. And then just a reminder and to highlight for those that aren't familiar with FFVP yet, you can see your 2 allocations in TMAC. It's broken down. You can see this at any point in the year. Most allocations are already in TMAC. If you have not started your National School Lunch Program application for this current school year, I cannot allocate you your FFVP dollars yet. So you will not have your allocations in FFVP. You have to get your normal program application submitted before your allocations will pop up for me to enter into TMAC. So don't fret if you don't see your allocations. That just means you haven't submitted your program application yet. But as soon as I see that you've submitted your program application, I can go in and put your allocations into TMAC so that you can maintain your balance or refer to your balances for each of those allocations throughout the year in TMAC. I'm also going to highlight how you see processed and accepted on the screenshot for the actual claims. So once you submit claims, it will say pending. And then once I've reviewed and accepted your claim, you will see accepted. And then it will switch over to processed once the processing occurs. You will not be paid if it says processed, but you will be within 10 to 14 business days of being paid if it says processed. I just wanted you to be well aware of that. And then if for some reason you don't see a payment, but you see it says processed in TMAC, please let us know. Glitches happen. We love technology, but we want to make sure you get paid. So if you're reconciling FFVP dollars with your finance team and for some reason you don't see a payment go through, let us know and we can do investigative work on our side to see what may have happened. All right. I'm going to take some time and say thank you for coming to your startup meeting for the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program for this year. And if you don't mind to take some time to fill out the evaluation survey, this will only help us improve trainings moving forward. And while you are doing that, I'm going to answer any questions you may have. I see Jill had one about a production record for FFVP. Production records are done at the local level. I'm happy to help you create one if you don't have one as is. Which leads me to another thing. Speaking of resources, it is my goal this year to provide some additional FFVP resources. And I would like for you to use the link in the chat to answer a survey we created about FFVP resources. So what kind of resources do you currently use? And what kind of resources would you like us to develop for you on your behalf? So we can share it statewide. I know there are some great resources already being used, so let's rip off and duplicate and share with one another so we can improve programs across Tennessee. All right, and Cheryl asked, will there be some new FFVP posters available? I have a PDF version I can share with you currently if you would like to print them yourself. That would be the quickest way. I will look in the office to see if there are any extras laying around that I can bring to S&P Academy. I'm not promising there are very many, and the printing process takes quite a while. But I would also like to create new posters, so I don't want to print too many of the old ones if we plan to create new posters sometime this year. So currently there are no new posters, but I can share the current poster that we have floating around with you to print. All right. And one more time, if you have any further questions. If not, okay. On the recap email, I will send out the PDF for the current poster. That way you guys can print those at your leisure and you will have all the resources you need to start the new school year off. Right? And then for those that were asking about the toolkit and what it looks like, I am going to share my screen and share the FFVP section of our website with you. One moment. All right. So this is the fresh fruit and vegetable section of our website. If you go into programs, and then you will click the drop down for the fresh fruit and vegetable program. There are resources listed here. And we do have the toolkit that will help you with budgeting. So again, you can do a spending plan, you can insert the information, you can insert your total days served, how much you want to spend, and it will automatically calculate how much funds you have remaining, all the things. There's a different financial management tab. It can help you with what journal entries can look like for those operational expenses and admin expenses. There is a produce calculator as well on here. And then there is a sample SOP for your fresh fruit and vegetable program and food safety, which if you're operating the program, you might want to have an SOP about it. And then we also have some best practices listed about nutrition education, how to spend those funds, and how to get kiddos to try new things. So again, that is on our website under the resource box. And we are currently in the process of revamping and refreshing this fresh fruit and vegetable program area on our website. So if it looks a little bit different here in a few weeks, you know why. We are revamping the website in all regards. All right. If there are no other questions, again, we will send out the recording of this training, the PowerPoint presentation that was provided. I will include any FFVP resources in that recap email, and I will also include the resource survey in case you were unable to fill that out today about any fresh fruit and vegetable items and resources that you would like to see from us this year. I will give you one more minute to get any final thoughts or questions into the chat, and then we will have a good ending to this training. All right, I don't see any other questions, so without further ado, I will let you enjoy the rest of your Thursday afternoon, and thank you so much for being here today. Have a great day.